we kick off the afternoon track, which is going to be the orchestrate subtrack, but we kick it off with a very interesting fireside chat between Praveen Akkiraju, who's the CEO of VCE, and it's going to be moderated by BV Jagdish. I mean, Jagdish definitely needs no introduction. He's basically a Silicon Valley icon. So, Praveen, Jagdish, I'll turn it over to you.
Praveen, welcome.
Thank
How
you.
are you?
Great.
Are you
Thank
enjoying
you.
the conference?
Absolutely. It's some wonderful talks.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, great content.
Yeah. Hopefully, as we kick this off, the excitement that we create here will attract a lot more people.
Certainly the fires, maybe.
So, I know you for almost 20 years now. I know you're a very, very customer-centric person. So there have been a lot of these sessions that has been going on since morning, right? About adoption of the cloud, where customers stand, what kind of customers are really looking at the cloud, and what kind of applications are being deployed. I mean, you being in the forefront, right, with the customers all the time, why don't you just share with us what's going on? What do you see in the market?
I think it's interesting today, just the sessions before this, to hear Yuri talk about the Netflix architecture. Because one of the most profound transitions that are happening right now is that what we call the journey to the cloud.
Yeah.
Right? When we worked together initially, it was the early days of the internet. Correct. And I think this sort of journey to the cloud is almost as profound a transition as the advent of the internet itself, because it's fundamentally changing not only the technology landscape, but also the economics and organizations, and affecting all of us as professionals in this space in a significant way. So, I think what a lot of customers are doing, we primarily work with large enterprises and service provider customers. They're in the middle of trying to figure out how do they evolve their architectures and their sort of strategy to be able to absorb these new technologies and fundamentally change how they deliver services to their end customers. So if you're a CIO, I think your number one concern today is how do you maintain control of your cloud, right?
This is inside the
enterprise,
not
right?
Using public clouds or anything.
Right. So the whole journey, we call it a journey because there's a public cloud. I mean, well understood, AWS. You saw a great example of it with Netflix. But there's tremendous amount of investment happening in what's called the private cloud or the data center, revitalization, right? So, I believe as it was with the internet, there's not going to be one single architecture. So what a lot of customers tell us is, how do we kind of get our infrastructure, make the best use of the tools that we have, whether it's, what kind of workloads do we put in the public cloud, what kind of workloads do you put in the private cloud, and more importantly, how do you connect those things together, right? And I think that's really the most significant transition that's happening. It's that journey, if you will, from siloed infrastructure to something that's more makes best use of both paradigms. Yeah.
So if you look at an enterprise, right, primarily that's where you are focusing all your efforts.
Yeah.
This whole concept of this hybrid cloud that everybody is talking about, where do you see, people are adapting combination of building a vCloud-based architecture within the private cloud and using an AWS or an Azure for Microsoft kind of stuff, or a Rackspace, which offers the OpenStack.
Right.
Where do you see this?
Yeah, I think if you kind of think about cloud architectures, it's really a destination, right? Where your workload ends up is actually a function of what your workloads look like. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's typically the first question we ask our customers is to say, well, what's your workload profile? I mean, if your application is designed for the cloud, as you heard Yuri talk about the Netflix application, then it probably belongs in something like a elastic public cloud, right? At the same time, if you have an ERP system, if you have homegrown Java applications, or if you have healthcare data which you need to protect, has a certain SLA and a security requirement, then you probably want to host them in more secure private clouds, right? So I think the answer is not an either or. It's not, do I deploy a private cloud or do I go completely to a public cloud? I think it's really going to be a mix for most enterprises between that range of certain workloads being in the private cloud, certain in the public cloud. More importantly, how do you make sure that data and and applications can share that infrastructure.
So what you're saying is you are actually seeing people using the public cloud in some form or the other.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of customer engagement, marketing applications, right, where you need applications with some level of elasticity.
Yeah.
So, certainly public cloud. I mean, we provide what we call on-ramps,
Yeah.
right, which enable private clouds to connect to
yeah.
the public cloud and share data in a much more simplistic way, because
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the holy grail architecture-wise.
So can you go a little deeper into this whole concept of the data center and the private cloud, especially this whole converged architecture that people are talking about, right? I mean, we had a great panel earlier which sort of addressed from product perspective,
right?
But I think you can address it from a customer perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important things to understand if you are an enterprise CIO, right, is the degree of change from a technology perspective, from an economics perspective, is overwhelming, right? There's new technology, new announcements come out almost every day. So what CIOs are really focusing on is, they want to be able to sort of abstract themselves from having to manage infrastructure or having to sort of worry about, well, is my software release on the computer and network all going to work, and focus more on delivering end user solutions. So converged infrastructure was a concept that basically, redefined the way data center cloud infrastructure is deployed by putting together compute network storage in a well-defined pre-engineered package. We call them V-blocks. We're the #1 market leader. We define the category pretty much. And that allows our customers to basically abstract themselves from the infrastructure. They know they have a reliable platform. They know they have a platform that can get deployed rapidly, right, and is configured for their requirements. So they can focus on, how do I deliver a better service to my end customers? So we actually had an interesting, you talk about public and private cloud. We actually, one of our customers is a large online education university, right? So they have about 300,000 students. They were an AWS user for almost 3 years. They got to a point where, the complexity and the cost was getting to a point where they needed to really evaluate whether it made sense for them to bring it in-house. And we found that we could give them a solution on a private cloud for the instantiation they had running on AWS, almost 1/5 cheaper, right? Oh, right. So public cloud is not always equals cheap, right? So that's something you need to understand, is that, and you did a good job, right? It's what is your architecture? Right. What is your operational process? Right. What does your organization look like?
Then you can save a lot of money. Yeah.
So I think that's really that's why I call the journey to the cloud, right? You got to think through the next level of detail.
Yeah, yeah. So let's switch a little bit on this software-defined networks, right? Obviously, there's a lot of hype around that, and also there's a lot of entrepreneurs, who have come and pitched to me as well, right, about problems that would possibly arise when enterprises migrate into this SDN. But on the other side, right, I keep hearing nobody is really deploying the SDNs, and Nicira acquisition by VMware hasn't really taken off, and not much revenues and stuff like that.
Right.
What's your thought on that?
Yeah, the most important thing to remember, particularly if you're an entrepreneur, right, you have to focus on the customer problem and providing the customer a solution, not on the technology widget, right? I think what SDN got trapped in a little bit was to really get trapped in sort of the technology itself as a widget standing alone by itself. And, and in that context, it's really hard for a customer who's already struggling with 15 other things, everything from VDI to security, to mobility and such like, to be able to take SDN and operationalize it. There might be a few customers with, thousands of IT staff who can do it. So I think, SDN has an important role to play in the next generation data center. And, you have different approaches articulated by Cisco, which is more sort of hardware, software together, and VMware, which is more sort of software-based, right, as well as a whole range of other startups. The key to remember is, how does it fit into the concept of the overall data center architecture, right? What is the problem you're trying to solve with software-defined networking? As you and I used to talk about Cisco way back when, and you can have 50 knobs, right? But maybe 2 of those knobs are really relevant, right? And so you have to really pick and make sure the SDN as a technology addresses a real problem within the context of a broader solution in the data center. So what we do is we basically incorporate SDN as a component of our overall converged infrastructure architecture. So you provide you the hardware as well as the software to be able to connect it to the application in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, wonderful. So You're the CEO of VCE. I don't know how many of you know. V stands for VMware, C is Cisco, and E is EMC, right? It's a very interesting, complex combination.
Interesting is a good word.
of a joint venture. Yeah. How do you manage it? I mean, did you lose all your hair because of...
I know we've seen each other more, in the middle, right? When 20 years ago, I did have a lot more hair.
I mean, think of managing VMware, EMC, and Cisco.
Yeah.
Think of these three guys sitting on the board of this poor guy, right?
I think at the end of the day, all these three companies are tremendously customer focused, right? So we always keep customer as the center point of all the conversations that we have, and I think we get everybody to rally to our bottom line, which is how do you deliver a phenomenal customer experience? And I think I always I get asked this question a lot, as you might imagine. So fundamentally, we as a company have been delivering tremendous results for our investors. Cisco, EMC, VMware. Intel is a minority investor as well. We've been, for the past 4 quarters, we've grown the business 50% year over year. We're on a $1.8 billion run rate. Yeah. So it's a significant business which is growing at dramatically significant multiples. We're a category leader. So I think, as we've talked about in the past, when you deliver results, I think you have the opportunity to have a different conversation, right? So we've been, the team that we have at VC is absolutely world class, and they're doing a phenomenal job of delivering results. And we're bringing a lot of value to our investors. More importantly, bringing a lot of value to our customers, and that's really how we rally.
Well, that's pretty impressive, right? To have a revenue run rate of like $1.8 billion in a span of just a few years, right?
That's right. We're in our 5th year of existence. Yeah.
Wow. How many customers is that?
We're about 800 customers around 57 countries. Wow. So about 2,000 units deployed worldwide.
Wow. So, Praveen, we know each other since 1995, 1996.
95, yeah.
At the time when you were a customer or service manager at Cisco, and I was doing Exodus, and, all of us were learning what internet was and how to scale this and all that stuff.
The good old days. Yeah.
But it's fascinating to see your career growth, right? I mean, you were at Cisco, you grew from where you were to eventually became like a general manager of more than $1 billion revenue divisions, right?
Yep.
Core routers you were running. And then you did that successfully for many years, and then you ran another division. And then eventually, this trio kind of appointed you as the CEO of this VCE, which is pretty challenging as well.
Yeah.
It's a very fascinating journey. I think many people would be very interested to hear your journey, right, from how you started, right? And in fact, I would be very interested to hear as well.
Well, I was, first of all, fortunate to be working with really amazing people such as yourself. And in the early days when you were building Exodus,
right.
We were, I think, all collectively learning about the internet, right? I was lucky to get into Cisco out of college just as the internet went private, right? It was a public entity, and when I was in grad school, I actually ran one of the SuraNet nodes for the university. So, having a strong grounding on the technology side really helps because it gives you context when you make strategic decisions. And as you kind of progress through your career, you have to make increasingly, more significant decisions. So, the opportunity to having seen the internet and the architecture being built ground up allowed me to, grow with it as well as be able to contribute to it. Cisco is a fantastic company, gave me a lot of opportunities. But I think from my perspective, there are 3 principles, right, that a mentor of mine told me a long time ago. Stay very close to the customer, right? Good news is never as good as it seems. Bad news is never as bad as it seems, right? That keeps you balanced, particularly in the job that I have these days, right? That's right. And then, I think the other thing that's something that I learned was very profound is when you are, you have to manage for the company, not to manage for your job, right? That's important is from a perspective, right? If you're managing to do a great job in what you're doing, of course you'll do well. Yeah. But if you actually have a broader perspective of what you're doing affects the company and be able to be vocal about, steering the direction of the company, irrespective of whether it is your job or not. I think that really, allows people to see you in a different light and broadens your horizons. Right.
I mean, what is fascinating is with all that, right, especially heavily customer-focused job, I appreciate the smile you have and the happiness you bring. So with a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience, oops.
Yeah.
Is that somebody saying time is up? Or so many entrepreneurs here, and this whole cloud, right? There's a lot of investment that's going on, a lot of entrepreneurial activity, right? So can you give some kind of a indication and guidance of where problems are being addressed and what kind of other problems exist that these entrepreneurs could perhaps take on?
It's very interesting as I looked at the agenda, right? The streams that you have, big data, Internet of Things, cloud. I know the TiE team's done an amazing job of orchestrating this whole thing, but I really wish you could actually intersect these three, because I think the opportunities are actually at the intersection of these three major technologies.
Big data.
Right? Big data, IoT, and the cloud. Because, I was talking to one of our customers, large energy company. They're talking about fundamentally putting sensors and grabbing data from way, way, way deep into the network, right? That's huge amounts of data, which doesn't make, which will only make sense if you have an analytics platform, which they cannot host everywhere, so it's connected to the cloud. So, if you're an entrepreneur, I'd really think about the intersection of these major trends rather than the stream within the trend itself, right? I mean, because to be honest, I think there are a zillion cloud companies, a zillion big data companies, a zillion IoT companies, right? There are probably not as many companies at the intersection points of these technologies. And I think that's in my mind, is still a pretty rich vein to tap into.
Wonderful. I mean, this is absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for
Thank you, Jagdish.
sharing all these
Always
things with
pleasure.
us. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.